The twin suns of Nexus Prime cast long, ominous shadows through the dense jungle canopy. Massive leaves, some larger than shuttlecraft, swayed in the humid breeze, while bioluminescent fungi pulsed with an eerie rhythm along the forest floor. This was no ordinary jungle. It was a death trap of carnivorous megaflora and predatory fauna that had claimed countless lives throughout the galaxy's exploration history. Lara Tavani moved with practiced silence through the undergrowth. Her pale blue skin, marked with intricate patterns that occasionally pulsed with light, was barely covered by the crude garments she'd fashioned from local fibers. The torn Galactic Concord insignia, still visible on her shoulder, was the only reminder of her former life. As a Verdante, her natural bioluminescence was both a blessing and a curse, helpful for navigating the darkness but impossible to fully suppress when her emotions ran high. "Damn this jungle," she muttered, carefully testing the ground before each step. Her violet eyes, adapted for the dim twilight of her homeworld, scanned continuously for danger. The satchel secured tightly across her body contained the only thing that mattered now. Evidence that could bring down Admiral Octavian Harkness and his corruption network within the Concord. 3 kilometers behind her, Mason Thorne checked his bio-tracker for the 5th time in as many minutes. The bounty hunter's tactical armor, scarred from countless hunts, whirred softly as environmental systems worked to keep his human physiology functioning in the oppressive heat. His weathered face, partially obscured by a breathing apparatus, showed no emotion as the signal pulsed stronger. "Getting closer," he muttered to himself, adjusting the plasma rifle slung across his back. The bounty on the Verdante fugitive was substantial, enough credits to finally pay off his ship and maybe even retire to one of those pleasure domes on Centauri 4. All he needed to do was extract her DNA sample for verification, and the Concord would transfer the credits immediately. Simple job, clean work, just business. The helmet's HUD flashed a proximity alert, half a kilometer ahead. The signal was stationary. Either she was resting or setting a trap. Thorne had tangled with Verdante before. Their biological connection to plant life made them unpredictable in environments like this. Still, they bled like everyone else when cornered. "Let's end this chase," he said, activating his tactical camouflage and moving forward with purpose. Lara had stopped at the edge of a strangely beautiful clearing. The ground here was covered with a carpet of vibrant purple flowers, each the size of a dinner plate, their centers a hypnotic swirl of gold and crimson. The air was thick with a sweet scent that reminded her of the ceremonial gardens back on Verdantis. Something wasn't right. Her instincts screamed danger, but her exhaustion after 3 days of continuous flight dulled her judgment. The tracker implanted in her shoulder during her Concord service was surely leading pursuers right to her. She needed rest, just for a moment, to gather her strength before the final push to the ancient ruins where she might find sanctuary. "Just a few minutes," she whispered, cautiously stepping into the clearing. The flowers seemed to quiver slightly as her foot touched down, but she attributed it to the breeze. 3 more steps in, and she paused, suddenly aware of a subtle vibration beneath her feet. Too late, she realized her mistake. The entire clearing shuddered, the carpet of flowers rippling like water. The ground beneath Lara abruptly gave way as the massive petals closed upward around her. She wasn't standing in a field of individual flowers. She was standing in the center of a single, enormous carnivorous plant, its gaping maw disguised as a beautiful meadow. "No!" she screamed, as the petals rose around her with surprising speed. Her hands scrambled for purchase on the slick inner surface, but the plant's digestive enzymes had already begun secreting, making everything slippery and burning where it touched her skin. Mason Thorne arrived at the edge of the clearing, just in time to witness the ground seem to fold inward, engulfing his quarry in an explosive movement of vegetation. Where the beautiful meadow had been, now rose an enormous flower-like structure, its petals sealed tight around what could only be the Verdante fugitive. "Shit," he muttered, assessing the situation with practiced detachment. The plant was easily 30 meters across, its central bulb now swollen with its catch. Through his thermal imaging, he could see the heat signature of the Verdante woman still moving inside, still alive, but not for long. These megaflora were known to digest their prey within minutes. The pragmatic choice was obvious. Wait for the plant to finish its meal, then extract the DNA sample from whatever remained. The bounty specified dead or alive, and dead was always easier to transport. No resistance, no complications. Yet, something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the way she had fought so desperately, or the rumors he'd heard about her being a whistleblower rather than the traitor the Concord painted her as. Or perhaps it was simply that dying in the belly of a plant seemed like a hell of a way to go, even for an enemy. "I must be getting soft," Thorne growled, unslinging his plasma rifle and adjusting the setting to cutting beam. Or stupid. The decision made, he charged forward. The plant sensed his approach, secondary tendrils whipping up from the ground to ensnare this new prey. Thorne dodged and rolled, firing precise bursts that severed the attacking appendages. The plant shuddered, a high-pitched keening emanating from somewhere within its mass. Reaching the central bulb, Thorne could hear muffled screaming and the sound of desperate struggle from within. The outer petals were tough, evolved to resist even the most determined prey, but his plasma cutter slowly carved through the fibrous material. Foul-smelling digestive fluid sprayed outward, sizzling where it landed on the ground. "Hold on in there!" he shouted, though he doubted she could hear him. Inside the plant, Lara was fighting for her life. The chamber was nearly filled with caustic fluid that burned her skin and clouded her vision. Her lungs burned as she held her breath, knowing that to inhale the noxious gases would mean instant death. Her bioelectric field, the natural defense of the Verdante, was useless against a plant this size. As her consciousness began to fade, she saw a bright light cutting through the wall of the chamber, a beam of intense energy slicing through the plant's flesh. With one final surge of strength, she pushed toward the light. Thorne cut a hole large enough to reach in, the plant convulsing around him. His armor protected him from the worst of the digestive fluids, but warnings flashed across his HUD as the caustic substance began degrading the outer layers. Reaching blindly into the slimy interior, his hand connected with something solid, an arm. He pulled with all his strength, enhanced by his armor's servos, and Lara Tavani came sliding out in a rush of fluid and plant matter. She gasped desperately for air, her blue skin covered in angry red welts where the digestive enzymes had begun breaking down her flesh. The plant wasn't done with its meal. Even as Thorne dragged Lara clear, massive roots erupted from the ground, coiling toward them like serpents. Thorne fired his plasma rifle one-handed, the other arm supporting the half-conscious Verdante. One by one, he severed the attacking roots, but they kept coming, relentless in their hunger. "Can you run?" he shouted at Lara. Her violet eyes fluttered open, confusion evident as she realized who had saved her. "You, the bounty hunter." "Running now, talking later," Thorne said, hauling her to her feet. "Move!" They sprinted for the edge of the clearing, the ground erupting behind them as more roots pursued. Lara stumbled, her injuries slowing her, but Thorne grabbed her arm and practically dragged her forward. They crashed through the undergrowth, not stopping until they had put several hundred meters between themselves and the carnivorous meadow. Finally, in the shadow of a massive tree trunk, they collapsed, both breathing heavily. Thorne kept his rifle trained in the direction they had come from, but there was no sign of pursuit. The plant, it seemed, had given up the chase. Lara looked at her rescuer with naked suspicion. "Why did you save me? Your bounty would be the same if I died." Thorne shrugged, his expression unreadable behind his breathing mask. "Easier to transport you alive, And I'm not in the business of watching people get eaten by plants." "How considerate," she said dryly, wincing as she examined the chemical burns on her arms. "So, what now? You turn me into the conquered, so Admiral Harkness can quietly dispose of me?" "That's the plan," Thorne replied, though with less conviction than he would have liked. "I've got a ship on the other side of this jungle. 3 days hike, assuming we don't get eaten by something worse than that flower." Lara laughed bitterly. "There are far worse things in Nexus Prime than that plant. And if you're planning to drag me through this jungle as your prisoner, neither of us will make it out alive." Thorne considered this. The jungle was indeed as dangerous as any environment he'd encountered in his years of bounty hunting. 2 sets of eyes and weapons would improve their chances significantly. "What do you propose?" "A truce," Lara said, meeting his gaze steadily. "We work together to get through this death trap. No shooting each other, at least until we're out of the jungle. After that, well, we can resume our previous arrangement if you insist." Thorne studied her for a long moment. "And I'm supposed to trust you won't knife me in my sleep?" "If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't need to wait until you were sleeping," Lara retorted. "I could have let that plant eat us both." "Fair point." Thorne finally removed his breathing mask, revealing a face younger than Lara had expected, with keen eyes and a jaw darkened by several days of stubble. "All right, Verdante. Truce until we're out of this jungle. But don't mistake this for anything more than temporary cooperation." "I wouldn't dream of it, human," Lara replied coolly. Thorne extended a hand. "Mason Thorne." After a moment's hesitation, Lara took it. "Lara Tavani?" Their unlikely alliance formed. They set about treating Lara's injuries with the limited medical supplies in Thorne's pack. The burns from the plant's digestive fluid were painful, but superficial. Her Verdante physiology already working to repair the damage. As Thorne applied a healing compound to the worst of the burns, he couldn't help but notice the intricate patterns beneath her skin, pulsing faintly with bioluminescence. "Your light show," he nodded toward the patterns. "Can you turn that off? It's like a beacon in the dark." Lara sighed. "It's not exactly voluntary. Strong emotions make it more pronounced. I can suppress it somewhat, but not completely." "Great," Thorne muttered. "A walking nightlight. That won't attract any predators at all." "My people evolved as nighttime creatures," Lara explained, bristling slightly. "The bioluminescence is for communication, not illumination, and I'm hardly the brightest thing in this jungle." She gestured to the glowing fungi and flowers surrounding them, many pulsing with far more intense light than her subtle patterns. Thorne conceded the point with a nod. "We should move. That plant might have friends, and staying in one place too long is asking for trouble." As they gathered their gear, Lara suddenly froze, her head tilted as if listening. "Water," she said. "I can hear running water to the east." Thorne consulted his nav system. "The River Saren. It's on my maps, but it's supposed to be another 5 kilometers east. Trust me, it's closer. We need to change course." "The river is our best route out of here," Thorne argued. "We follow it downstream, and it leads straight to the extraction point." "The river has changed course," Lara insisted. "I can feel it. The groundwater patterns have shifted." Thorne wanted to dismiss her claim, but remembered that Verdante had an almost supernatural connection to plant life and water systems. It was what made them such valuable scouts and navigators, and such effective saboteurs when they turned against the Concord. "Lead the way," he said finally. "But if this is a trick, you'll shoot me and collect your bounty." "Yes. I understand the terms of our arrangement," Lara finished for him, already moving through the undergrowth with a grace that belied her recent brush with death. True to Lara's prediction, they reached the banks of the River Saren within an hour. But what should have been a calm, navigable waterway was now a raging torrent, swollen with recent rains and rushing with terrible force between the jungle banks. This is not ideal, Thorn observed, watching as entire trees were swept downstream in the churning waters. The seasonal rains must have come early this year, Lara said. We need to find a place to cross. They followed the riverbank for several kilometers, looking for a narrower section or natural bridge. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, forcing them to climb over massive roots and hack through dense undergrowth. All the while, the roar of the river reminded them of the deadly barrier it presented. As dusk approached, bringing with it new dangers, they finally discovered a potential crossing. A massive fallen tree spanned most of the river's width, its enormous trunk creating a precarious bridge. That looks barely stable, Thorn said, eyeing the natural bridge dubiously. It's our best option before nightfall, Lara replied. We don't want to be on this side of the river after dark. Why not? As if in answer, a chorus of eerie howls rose from the jungle behind them, a sound like nothing Thorn had ever heard, somewhere between a wolf's cry and the screech of tearing metal. That's why, Lara said grimly. Nexus stalkers. They hunt in packs at night, and they're fond of flesh, particularly mammalian flesh like yours. And they won't cross the river? They can't swim. The log is our only chance. Thorn assessed the makeshift bridge once more. Ladies first, he offered with a grim smile. Lara rolled her eyes. Such a gentleman. She approached the massive trunk, testing its stability before committing her weight. The bark was slick with moss and spray from the river, but the core seemed solid enough. With careful steps, she began making her way across, arms outstretched for balance. Thorn followed a few meters behind, his heavier frame and armor making the crossing more treacherous. Halfway across, the log shifted slightly, settling deeper into the rushing water. They both froze, waiting to see if it would hold. Keep moving, Thorn called over the roar of the river. Slowly! They continued their careful progress, the howls of the stalkers growing closer behind them. 3/4 of the way across, disaster struck. A massive section of debris, the tangled remains of several smaller trees, came barreling downstream, smashing into their log bridge with tremendous force. The impact sent vibrations through the entire trunk. Lara lost her footing, tumbling sideways toward the rushing water. In a split-second reaction, Thorn lunged forward, grabbing her wrist just as she went over the edge. The sudden movement threw off his own balance, and he found himself lying prone along the log, one arm holding Lara's weight as she dangled precariously above the deadly current. Don't let go, she cried, her free hand scrabbling for purchase on the slick bark. Wasn't planning on it, Thorn grunted, the servos in his armor whining as they struggled to compensate for the awkward position. Can you swing up? Lara tried, her body swinging beneath the log. On her third attempt, she managed to hook a leg over the trunk, giving Thorn enough leverage to haul her back up. They lay there for a moment, both breathing heavily, acutely aware of how close they'd come to disaster. That's twice you've saved my life today, Lara said quietly. I'm beginning to think you're not very good at being a bounty hunter. I'm excellent at my job, Thorn replied, pushing himself upright. I just prefer to deliver my bounties alive when possible. Professional pride. Before Lara could respond, a tremendous splash erupted from the water below them. A serpentine head, at least 2 meters across, rose on a muscular neck, jaws lined with razor-sharp teeth, snapping at the air where Lara had been dangling moments before. Move! Thorn shouted, hauling Lara to her feet. The creature, some sort of aquatic predator, lunged again, its massive jaws clamping onto the log bridge and shaking it violently. They ran, abandoning caution for speed, as the log began to splinter beneath the creature's powerful bite. The far bank was still 10 meters away when the bridge gave way entirely, breaking apart under their feet. Thorn leaped forward with all his strength, his armor's enhanced systems giving him just enough distance to reach the shore. He turned instantly, expecting to see Lara falling into the water and the waiting jaws of the river monster. Instead, he was astonished to see her sailing through the air toward him, having jumped at the same moment with inhuman grace. She crashed into him, knocking them both backward onto solid ground as the remains of their bridge were dragged beneath the churning waters. The river monster roared in frustration, its massive form visible just beneath the surface as it searched for its lost prey before finally swimming away. "What the hell was that thing?" Thorn gasped, disentangling himself from Lara. "River Leviathan," she replied, equally breathless. 20 feet of pure appetite. They usually stay in the deeper channels. The flooding must have displaced it, Thorn concluded, getting to his feet and surveying their surroundings. The eastern bank of the river appeared marginally less dense than the nightmare they'd left behind. But it was still very much a deadly jungle. "We should keep moving while we have light." As they pushed deeper into the jungle, the twin sons of Nexus Prime began their descent, casting long shadows through the canopy. The vegetation here was different. Fewer carnivorous species and more bioluminescent flora that began to glow as darkness approached. "We need shelter for the night," Lara said, studying the darkening sky with concern. "Preferably something defensible." They found it in the form of a hollow at the base of a massive tree, its entrance partially concealed by hanging vines. After carefully checking for inhabitants or obvious dangers, they cleared enough space for both of them to rest. Thorn set up portable perimeter alerts from his pack, while Lara gathered some of the non-toxic bioluminescent fungi to provide light. As night fell completely, the jungle transformed around them. The darkness was broken by thousands of points of light, glowing plants, insects, and other life forms creating a spectacle like an earthly night sky reflected on the ground. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful. "I'll take first watch," Thorn said, positioning himself near the entrance with his rifle across his knees. Lara nodded, settling against the far wall of their shelter. After a moment of silence, she spoke again. "Why are you really hunting me, Thorn? You don't seem like the typical conquered mercenary." Thorn was quiet for so long that Lara thought he might not answer. "Credits," he said finally. "Nothing personal. The bounty on you is enough to set me up for a long time." "And you don't care why there's a bounty? Whether I'm guilty of anything?" He shrugged. "Not my job to be judge and jury. Just delivery." "Even if the justice I'd face is a quick execution to silence me?" Lara pressed. "Even if what I'm carrying could prevent a war?" That caught his attention. "What are you talking about?" Lara touched the satchel she hadn't let out of her sight. "Admiral Harknex has been selling classified Conquered defense algorithms to the Krell. I have proof, financial transactions, communication logs, everything. He's been deliberately sabotaging our defensive capabilities for profit." "The Krell?" Thorn's expression darkened. "Those insectoid bastards killed half my unit on Proxima 3. And they'll kill many more if Harknex succeeds in weakening our outer defensive grids," Lara said quietly. "That's why I ran. Not because I betrayed the Conquered, but because I refused to stand by while Harknex did." Thorn was silent again, processing this information. "You have actual proof, not just theories. Solid evidence, enough to bring him down in any fair tribunal." She laughed bitterly. "But there won't be a fair tribunal if he gets to me first. That's why the bounty is so high. He's desperate to silence me before I can get this to someone who can act on it." "Why should I believe you?" Thorn asked, though there was less hostility in his tone than before. Lara's bioluminescent patterns pulsed slightly brighter. "We, Verdante, can't lie without it showing in our light patterns. It's a biological impossibility. Our emotions are directly connected to our bioluminescence. Watch my patterns as I speak if you don't believe me." She locked eyes with him. "Everything I've told you is true. Harknex is a traitor. I'm trying to save lives, not take them." Thorn studied her patterns carefully, noting no erratic flares or diminishing that might indicate deception. Either she was telling the truth, or she was the best liar he'd ever encountered, and his experience with Verdante suggested the former was more likely. "Let's say I believe you," he said slowly. "What's your plan? How do you get this evidence to someone who can use it when Harkness controls most of the communication channels off this planet?" Lara leaned forward, her voice dropping despite the isolation of their shelter. "There are ruins on this planet, remnants of the Nexus builders, the civilization that engineered this world before they vanished. Some of their technology still functions, including a matter transmission network that operates outside normal space. If I can reach the primary node, I can transmit the evidence directly to the conquered High Council, bypassing Harkness control entirely." "And you know where this node is?" "I have coordinates. It's about 2 days' journey from here, deeper into the jungle." Thorn frowned. "If such technology exists, why hasn't the Conquered secured it already?" "They've tried. Multiple expeditions have been lost. The ruins are protected by ancient security systems that react badly to certain energy signatures, including most Conquered weapons. But Verdante bioelectricity is compatible. We can navigate the defenses where others can't." "Convenient," Thorn remarked skeptically. "The Nexus builders had a special relationship with my ancestors," Lara explained. "Some historians believe they may have had a hand in Verdante evolution, though that's never been proven." Thorn rubbed his stubbled chin thoughtfully. "So instead of collecting my bounty, you want me to help you reach these mysterious ruins so you can use ancient alien tech to expose a conquered admiral as a traitor? That about sum it up?" "That's the general idea," Lara replied with a faint smile. "I'd compensate you, of course. The Verdante government would pay handsomely for this evidence, probably more than your bounty." "Promises of future payment don't fuel my ship or pay my debts," Thorn countered. "Then do it because it's right," Lara said simply. "Because letting Harkness sell us out to the Krell means more soldiers dying like your friends on Proxima 3. That struck a nerve, as she'd intended." Thorn fell silent, his expression hardening as memories surfaced. Finally, he sighed. "I'll think about it. Get some rest. You take next watch in 4 hours." Lara nodded, recognizing that this was as much of a concession as she was likely to get for now. She settled back, closing her eyes but remaining alert. Trust was a luxury neither of them could fully afford yet. The night passed in relative calm, disturbed only by the distant sounds of jungle predators and the occasional alarm from Thorn's perimeter sensors as curious, nocturnal creatures investigated their shelter. They took turns, keeping watch, neither fully sleeping but both getting enough rest to function. As the first light of dawn filtered through the canopy, they prepared to move out. Thorn seemed preoccupied, checking and rechecking his equipment with mechanical precision. "Have you made your decision?" Lara finally asked, as they packed up the last of their supplies. Thorn's jaw tightened. "I want to see this evidence first. If it's as compelling as you claim, then maybe we can renegotiate our arrangement." It wasn't the full commitment Lara had hoped for, but it was progress. "Fair enough." They set out through the jungle, Lara leading the way, based on coordinates stored in a small, well-worn nav device. The going was difficult, the terrain increasingly broken by ravines and rocky outcroppings as they moved deeper into Nexus Prime's interior. The vegetation became stranger too, with floating gas bladders that drifted among the trees and crystalline formations that grew from living wood. By midday, dark clouds had gathered overhead, bringing with them an oppressive electrical charge that made the hair on Thorn's arms stand on end. "We need to find cover," he said, eyeing the sky with concern. "That's not a normal storm." "Ion storm," Lara confirmed grimly. "The electromagnetic discharge will fry any unshielded electronics." "Including my armor systems and your nav device," Thorn added. "How far to the ruins?" "Still a day's journey at our current pace. There's a valley ahead that might offer some protection from the worst of the storm." They quickened their pace, racing against the approaching tempest. The valley Lara had mentioned turned out to be more of a deep ravine, its walls lined with dense vegetation that grew horizontally from the stone. At the bottom, a shallow stream trickled between moss-covered rocks. "This should provide some natural shielding," Lara said as they scrambled down the steep slope. "The rock has high metallic content that disperses electrical charge." No sooner had they reached the bottom than the storm broke overhead. Lightning unlike anything Thorn had ever seen, violet and green bolts that branched and twisted in impossible patterns, tore across the sky. The air itself seemed to crackle with energy, and the smell of ozone was overwhelming. Thorn's armor systems began to fail almost immediately, warning lights flashing across his HUD before it went dark entirely. The servos locked up, turning the armor from an asset to a liability in seconds. "Help me get this off," he grunted, struggling with the manual release catches that were designed for emergency use only. Lara rushed to assist, her nimble fingers working the complicated latches. Together, they managed to remove the chest and back plates, followed by the limb sections, until Thorn was left in just the form-fitting undersuit that provided thermal regulation. Without the armor, he looked smaller, but more agile. A lean, muscular man with the hardened physique of someone who lived by his reflexes in training. Lara found herself noticing details she'd overlooked before. The faint scar that ran along his jawline, the intensity of his eyes when not masked by tactical displays. "What?" he asked, catching her appraising look. "Nothing," she replied quickly. "I just expected more cybernetic enhancements. Most bounty hunters are more machine than organic these days." "I prefer to rely on what nature gave me," Thorn said, carefully stacking his disabled armor components under an outcropping where they would be protected from the rain that had begun to fall. "Implants can be hacked or disabled. The mind and body can adapt." Lightning struck nearby, the concussion of thunder so intense they could feel it in their bones. The storm was directly overhead now, turning day into an eerie twilight, broken by flashes of otherworldly light. "We're stuck here until it passes," Lara observed, settling beneath the natural shelter of a rock overhang. "Could be hours." Thorn joined her, keeping a careful distance between them. "Show me the evidence," he said. "You promised." Lara hesitated, then nodded. From her satchel, she withdrew a small data crystal, its surface etched with Verdante script. "This contains everything: financial records, communications, security protocols that were altered to create backdoors. Harkness has been working with the Krell for over 2 years." She activated the crystal, and a holographic display flickered to life between them. Transaction logs, communication transcripts, and technical specifications scrolled past, all incriminating Admiral Harkness beyond any reasonable doubt. Thorn studied the data carefully, his expression growing darker with each new piece of evidence. "These defense grid modifications, they match the vulnerability patterns the Krell exploited at Proxima 3. They knew exactly where to hit us because Harkness told them." "Yes," Lara said quietly. "The attack on Proxima 3 was a test run, a demonstration of what the Krell were paying for. There are plans for larger strikes against major conquered worlds, once the full algorithm set is delivered." Thorn's hands clenched into fists. "I watched good people die because of those vulnerabilities. Friends. And all this time, it was deliberate sabotage." "I'm sorry," Lara said, genuine empathy in her voice. "When I discovered what was happening, I couldn't stay silent, no matter the personal cost." Thorn looked up from the data, meeting her eyes with a new intensity. "If we get this to the High Council, what happens to Harkness?" "If justice prevails, court-martial, stripping of rank, probably execution for high treason," Lara replied. "But that's a big if. He has powerful allies." "Not powerful enough to save him from what he deserves," Thorn said with quiet certainty. His decision was made. "I'll help you reach the ruins. We'll get this evidence transmitted." Relief washed over Lara's features. her bioluminescent patterns brightening momentarily with emotion. "Thank you, Mason." It was the first time she'd used his first name, and something in her tone made him look at her differently. For a brief moment, they weren't fugitive and bounty hunter, but simply two people united by a common cause. The moment passed as another violent lightning strike reminded them of their precarious situation. They settled in to wait out the storm, sharing ration bars from Thorne's pack and exchanging information that might help their journey. "Tell me about these ruins," Thorne said between bites of the tasteless but nutritious bar. "What should we expect?" "The Nexus builders constructed massive underground complexes," Lara explained. "This particular site houses one of their matter transmitters, technology far beyond even current Concord capabilities. The transmitter can send objects, or data, instantaneously across vast distances, without using normal space or conventional communications channels." "Sounds like something the Concord would kill to control," Thorne observed. "They've tried, but the security systems react violently to Concord energy weapons and power signatures. 3 expeditions were lost before they gave up. Officially, at least. And you can bypass these defenses because Verdante bioelectricity operates on frequencies the security systems recognize as friendly," Lara explained. "There are historical connections between my people and the builders, possibly a mentorship relationship. Many of our oldest technologies show builder influence." Thorne nodded thoughtfully. "Once we transmit the evidence, what's your plan?" Lara hesitated. "There's a location encoded in the transmitter network, what my people call a sanctuary. If I can activate the proper sequence, the transmitter should send me there." "And me?" "I don't know," she admitted. "The technology was designed for Verdante physiology. It might work for humans. It might not. Or it might reconfigure you in transit." "Reconfigure? You mean rearrange my atoms in unpleasant ways?" "It's a possibility," Lara acknowledged. "The alternative is to return the way we came, but Harkness will have people watching your ship by now." Thorne grimaced. "Cross that bridge when we come to it, I guess." The storm raged for hours, lightning continually striking the jungle around their ravine shelter. When it finally began to subside, late afternoon was giving way to evening. The air was charged with residual energy, making every surface tingle to the touch. "We won't make much more progress today," Thorne said, surveying the darkening sky. "Better to make camp here and start fresh in the morning." Lara agreed, and they set about creating a more secure camp for the night. Thorne's armor systems were slowly coming back online as the electromagnetic interference dissipated, but full functionality would take hours. They ate a more substantial meal from their combined supplies and took turns washing in the stream, the cold water refreshing after days in the jungle heat. As night fell, bringing with it the now familiar symphony of nocturnal creatures, they sat beside a small heating unit from Thorne's pack. The faint blue glow it cast mingled with Lara's natural bioluminescence, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ravine walls. "How did you end up working for the Concord?" Thorne asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had developed between them. "Verdante aren't usually drawn to military service." Lara's patterns dimmed slightly, a sign of sadness or reflection. "My parents were scientists studying builder artifacts on the outer colonies. They were killed during a Krell raid when I was 16. The Concord rescued me, gave me purpose, a chance for justice. I believed in what they stood for, or what I thought they stood for. Until Harkness. Until I discovered that the same organization I dedicated my life to was being corrupted from within." "Yes." She looked at him curiously. "What about you? How does someone become a bounty hunter chasing political fugitives?" Thorne's expression hardened. "After Proxima 3, I couldn't stomach taking orders anymore. Too many good soldiers sacrificed for what I now know were deliberate, strategic errors. I left. Found I had a talent for tracking people who didn't want to be found. The credits were good, and I didn't have to trust anyone but myself. And now? Lara asked softly. Now I'm questioning whether I've been on the wrong side all along, he admitted, meeting her gaze. Helping the very people I thought I'd left behind. Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition of shared pain and purpose that transcended their original roles. Lara moved slightly closer, her hand almost touching his on the ground between them. It's never too late to choose a different path, she said. Before Thorn could respond, a sharp beep from his partially restored armor systems shattered the moment. He scrambled to check the alert, his expression instantly turning grim. Aerial transport, coming in fast from the east, he reported, grabbing his rifle. Concord signatures. Harknecks must have tracked us, Lara said, quickly gathering her satchel. We need to move, now. They scrambled up the ravine wall, using the thick vegetation for handholds. From the higher vantage point, they could see lights in the distance, the unmistakable pattern of a Concorde assault shuttle on approach. They'll have thermal imaging, motion sensors. The works, Thorn said, assessing their options rapidly. We can't outrun them, not in the dark. We don't need to outrun them, Lara replied, pointing to a dense section of jungle ahead. We just need to reach the fungal groves. The bioluminescence and heat signatures will mask our presence. They ran, pushing through the undergrowth with desperate speed. Behind them, the whine of the shuttle's engines grew louder, searchlights sweeping the canopy. They reached the edge of the fungal grove just as the shuttle passed overhead, its lights briefly illuminating them before they plunged into the forest of glowing mushrooms and pulsing, plant-like structures. The grove was like entering another world. Massive mushrooms towered overhead, some reaching 15 meters high, their caps glowing with vivid blues, purples, and greens. The ground was carpeted with smaller specimens, each pulsing with its own rhythm of light. The air was thick with luminescent spores that drifted like snow, creating a disorienting, dreamlike atmosphere. Stay close, Lara whispered, taking Thorn's hand to guide him. The spores can cause hallucinations if you breathe too many. They moved deeper into the grove, using the massive fungi for cover as the shuttle circled overhead. The thermal signatures of the mushrooms, which generated considerable heat as part of their bioluminescent process, effectively masked their own body heat from sensors. After nearly an hour of tense movement through the surreal landscape, the sound of the shuttle finally receded into the distance. They'll be back with ground teams, Thorn said, brushing glowing spores from his shoulders. We need to keep moving. The ruins are less than a day's journey now, Lara confirmed, checking her nav device. If we travel through the night, we might reach them by morning. They pushed on, the fungal grove gradually giving way to more typical jungle terrain. The twin moons of Nexus Prime provided enough light to navigate by, supplemented by Lara's bioluminescence when necessary. They moved in near silence, both acutely aware that Concord troops would be deploying throughout the area. Dawn found them exhausted, but determined. Having covered significant ground during their night march, the terrain had changed dramatically. Massive rock formations jutted from the jungle floor, some bearing faint etchings that hinted at artificial origins rather than natural formation. We're close, Lara said, her voice hushed with anticipation. These are boundary markers for the builder complex. They paused to rest briefly, sharing the last of their water rations. Thorn's armor had recovered most of its functionality, though some of the more advanced systems remained offline. They were both filthy, scratched, and exhausted. But the prospect of reaching their goal lent them renewed energy. What's the plan once we reach the transmitter? Thorn asked. I need to activate the console, authenticate my bioelectric signature, and initiate the transmission sequence, Lara explained. The data will be sent directly to specific members of the High Council whose loyalty I trust. After that, I'll attempt to access the sanctuary coordinates. And if Concord forces find us before then? Lara's expression turned grim. Then we hold them off long enough to complete the transmission. The evidence is what matters. It has to reach the council. Thorn nodded, understanding the implication. Their lives were secondary to the mission. Let's finish this. Then, they continued their journey, the jungle gradually thinning as they approached what appeared to be a sheer rock face, covered in vines and centuries of growth. To the untrained eye, it was simply another cliff face. But Lara approached it with purpose, her hands running along the stone surface with practiced movements. Here, she said finally, pressing a section that looked no different from the rest. A faint, humming vibration ran through the rock, and a seam appeared, a perfect line that widened into a doorway as a section of the cliff face slid inward. Beyond lay darkness, broken only by faint lines of blue light, tracing geometric patterns along what appeared to be a corridor. Builder architecture, Lara explained, stepping confidently into the opening. Still functional after millennia. Thorn followed more cautiously, his rifle at the ready. The door slid closed behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them inside the ancient complex. The air was surprisingly fresh, suggesting some kind of environmental system was still operational. The corridor sloped gently downward, the blue light lines brightening as they detected movement. The main chamber should be ahead, Lara said, her own bioluminescence seeming to resonate with the patterns on the walls. That's where the transmitter will be located. They moved deeper into the complex, passing through several more doorways that opened automatically at their approach. The architecture was unlike anything Thorn had seen. Flowing lines and perfect geometry combined in ways that seemed to defy conventional engineering. Everything was built on a massive scale, suggesting the builders had been either very large beings or simply fond of grandiose construction. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. At the center stood a platform of what appeared to be black glass, surrounded by curved control panels covered in symbols that glowed with the same blue light as the corridor markings. The air hummed with power, ancient machinery still functioning after countless years. The transmitter, Lara breathed, approaching the central platform with reverence. It's intact. She moved to one of the control panels, her fingers tracing the symbols with practiced ease. As she touched them, the symbols responded, changing color and configuration. The humming in the chamber intensified. You can read that? Thorn asked, impressed despite himself. Some of it. Our oldest texts preserve elements of builder language, Lara explained, continuing to work the controls. The basics are similar enough to make sense of the transmission protocols. Thorn took up a position near the entrance they had used, keeping watch for any signs of pursuit. How long will this take? To prepare the transmission? Minutes. But I need to verify the targeting coordinates. Make sure the data package is properly formatted for their systems. She worked quickly, her bioluminescent patterns synchronizing with the pulsing lights of the control panel in a hypnotic rhythm. The chamber continued to awaken around them. More systems coming online as Lara's interaction with the controls spread through the ancient network. Lights illuminated previously shadowed areas, revealing the true scale of the room, easily 100 meters across, with additional platforms and equipment arranged in concentric circles around the central transmitter. Almost ready, Lara announced, removing the data crystal from her satchel and placing it on a recessed section of the control panel. The crystal glowed brighter as it interfaced with the builder technology. Before she could complete the sequence, a distant boom echoed through the complex, followed by the unmistakable sound of weapons fire. They've found us, Thorn said grimly, checking his rifle's charge. How much more time do you need? 3 minutes to initiate the transmission, another 2 to program the sanctuary coordinates. I'll buy you that time, Thorn said, moving toward the corridor. Complete the transmission. That's the priority. Mason, Lara began, but he cut her off. No arguments. We both know what's at stake. His expression softened momentarily. Just try not to leave without me, okay? Before she could respond, He was gone, moving swiftly up the corridor toward the sounds of approaching conquered forces. Lara turned back to the console, working with renewed urgency as the sounds of battle began to echo through the complex. In the upper corridors, Thorn had positioned himself at a choke point where the passage narrowed before opening into a larger antechamber. He could hear the conquered strike team communicating as they advanced, professional, methodical, and well-equipped, just as he would expect from an elite unit sent to eliminate a high-value target. The first soldiers appeared around a bend in the corridor, their armor gleaming under the blue light strips. Thorn opened fire immediately, his rifle's plasma bolts striking the lead soldier squarely in the chest. The man went down, but his companions quickly took cover, returning fire with disciplined bursts. Thorn ducked behind a protruding section of wall as plasma bolts scorched the ancient stone around him. He counted at least 6 distinct weapons firing, a full squad, then, and likely more behind them. "This is Commander Vask of Conquered Special Operations," a voice called out during a brief lull in the firing. "Surrender the fugitive, and you'll be granted leniency, bounty hunter. Continue to resist, and you'll be treated as an enemy of the conquered." "Sorry, Commander," Thorn called back. "I've had a change of career plans." He blind fired around his cover, forcing the soldiers to duck back. It was a delaying tactic, nothing more. He couldn't hold this position indefinitely against a trained strike team, but he didn't need to. He just needed to give Lara enough time. The conquered forces began a coordinated advance, some providing covering fire, while others moved forward in short rushes. Thorn picked off one more soldier, but was forced to retreat further down the corridor as their superior numbers began to tell. In the main chamber, Lara worked feverishly at the controls, the data crystal now fully integrated with the builder system. The central platform had come alive, a column of shifting blue energy rising from its center to the ceiling high above. The transmission was nearly ready. A massive explosion rocked the complex, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. The Concord forces were using heavier weapons now, trying to blast their way through Thorn's defensive position. Lara's fingers flew over the final sequence, with a surge of power that made the lights throughout the chamber flicker. The data transmission initiated. The column of energy pulsed brightly, then stabilized as the information began flowing through the ancient network to its distant destination. "Evidence transmission in progress," announced a synthesized voice in the builder language, which Lara understood only partially. "Destination nodes accepting data." It was working. The evidence was being transmitted directly to the High Council members she had targeted, bypassing all of Harkness's safeguards and monitoring systems. Now, she needed to program the sanctuary coordinates before... The sound of intense firefight grew closer. Thorn was being driven back toward the main chamber, still fighting but clearly outnumbered. Lara redoubled her efforts, inputting the complex sequence that would activate the matter transmission function of the platform. The chamber doors slid open, and Thorn backed through, firing continuously to keep the Concord forces at bay. His armor showed multiple scorch marks from near misses, and blood trickled from a wound on his temple. "How much longer?" he shouted over the weapon fire. "Transmission complete!" Lara called back triumphantly. "I'm programming the sanctuary coordinates now." A new voice cut through the chaos, cold, authoritative, and instantly recognizable to both of them. "That will be quite enough, Specialist Tavani." Admiral Octavian Harkness stepped into view behind the conquered soldiers. His pristine white uniform, a stark contrast to the battle-worn appearance of his troops. Tall and aristocratic, with silver hair and cybernetic implants visible around his left eye. He exuded the confident authority of a man accustomed to absolute power. "Your little crusade ends here," Harkness continued, gesturing for his soldiers to hold their fire but maintain their aim. "I must admit, you've led us on quite a chase. Using builder technology was unexpected." "It's over, Harkness," Lara replied, her voice steady despite the danger. "The evidence has already been transmitted to the High Council. They know everything. The Krell deals. The sabotage defenses. All of it. A flicker of concern crossed Harkness's face, quickly replaced by his practiced calm. An unfortunate technical malfunction in this ancient facility, sending corrupted data that will be dismissed as a hoax, particularly when the supposed source is found dead at the scene, alongside her bounty hunter accomplice. He stepped forward, his soldiers fanning out to cover the chamber. I had such hopes for you, Tavani. Your talents could have been useful to our enterprise. Instead, you'll be remembered as a traitor who died resisting arrest. Thorn had positioned himself between Lara and the conquered forces, his rifle trained on Harkness despite the overwhelming odds. You're the only traitor here, Admiral. How many conquered soldiers died because of your vulnerabilities? How many on Proxima 3? Acceptable losses in a greater game, Harkness replied dismissively. The Concord is bloated, inefficient. The arrangement with the Krell will reshape the political landscape to something more manageable. While they talked, Lara continued working the console behind her, her movements subtle enough to go unnoticed by the soldiers focused on Thorn. The platform's energy column was changing color, shifting from blue to a vibrant purple as the sanctuary coordinates locked into place. You won't reshape anything from a prison cell, Thorn said, keeping Harkness's attention focused on him. Or an execution chamber. Harkness laughed coldly. Bold words from a man about to die. Commander Vask, eliminate them both. The conquered soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the entire chamber was bathed in pulsing purple light. The transmitter platform had fully activated, its energy field expanding outward in concentric rings. No! Harkness shouted, recognizing too late what was happening. Stop her! Plasma bolts flew across the chamber as the soldiers opened fire. Thorn dove for cover, returning fire as best he could while moving toward the platform, where Lara stood, fully exposed to the barrage. A bolt struck her in the shoulder, spinning her around with the impact. She cried out in pain, but remained standing, her hands still on the final control. Thorn reached her side, providing covering fire as more bolts impacted around them. It's programmed, Lara gasped, clutching her wounded shoulder. But the transmitter, it wasn't designed for humans. If you step onto that platform... No choice now, Thorn replied grimly, firing until his rifle's energy cell depleted. He tossed the weapon aside and drew his sidearm, continuing to hold off the advancing soldiers. We go together or not at all. Harkness himself had drawn a weapon now, his face contorted with rage as he realized his carefully constructed plans were unraveling. I will not be undone by a treasonous alien and a mercenary, he snarled, taking careful aim at Lara. Time seemed to slow as multiple events converged. Harkness fired, the bolt streaking across the chamber toward Lara's heart. Thorn threw himself into its path, the plasma burning through his armor and into his side with a sickening hiss. The transmitter platform reached full power, the purple energy field now a swirling vortex above the black glass surface. Lara screamed as Thorn collapsed against her, his face contorted in agony, but his eyes still alert. With her good arm, she supported his weight, backing them both toward the platform as the conquered forces advanced. Not how I planned to end my career, Thorn managed through gritted teeth, blood soaking through his undersuit. It's not ending, Lara insisted, her own wound throbbing with each heartbeat. Not today. They reached the edge of the platform, Concord soldiers closing in from all sides. Harkness was shouting orders, his composure finally shattered as he saw his quarry about to escape. The bond, Lara whispered, her bioluminescent patterns flaring brilliantly as she summoned every ounce of her Verdante bioelectric field. Trust me. Before Thorn could respond, she pressed her forehead to his, initiating the deepest form of Verdante connection, a sharing of bioelectric patterns that went beyond physical contact. Her light seemed to flow into him, creating matching patterns beneath his skin that glowed with impossible brightness. As the conquered soldiers reached the platform's edge, Lara and Thorn stepped backward onto the black glass surface. The purple vortex descended around them, enveloping them in swirling energy. "This isn't possible!" Harknex roared, witnessing something no human had ever seen. A successful cross-species matter transmission. "Shoot them! Shoot them now!" A final volley of plasma bolts passed harmlessly through the space where Lara and Thorn had stood. The vortex collapsed in upon itself with a thunderous implosion, leaving only the empty platform behind. They were gone. Consciousness returned to Lara in waves, each bringing a new sensation: cool air against her skin, a soft surface beneath her body, the distant sound of running water. She opened her eyes to find herself in a chamber unlike any she had seen before. Walls of what appeared to be living crystal, softly pulsing with inner light, surrounded a space furnished with objects that seemed to grow organically from the floor. Most surprisingly, her wounded shoulder no longer hurt. She sat up cautiously, finding the injury completely healed. Not even a scar remained to mark where the plasma bolt had struck. "Mason!" she called out, suddenly fearful. Had the transmitter failed to bring him through intact? Had the biological differences proven too great after all? "Over here!" came his voice from an adjoining chamber. "You might want to see this." She rose, finding her strength fully restored, and moved toward his voice. She found him standing before a vast viewport that revealed an underground landscape of breathtaking beauty, a hidden world of crystal formations, luminescent pools, and vegetation unlike anything on the surface. Waterfalls cascaded from the distant ceiling hundreds of meters above, feeding meandering rivers that disappeared into the misty distance. "The sanctuary," Lara breathed, moving to stand beside him. "It's real." Thorn turned to face her, and Lara gasped in shock. Where the plasma bolt had burned through his side, leaving what should have been a life-threatening wound, there was now only healthy skin. But more startling were the faint bioluminescent patterns visible beneath his skin. Patterns that mirrored her own Verdante markings, though much fainter. "What did you do to me?" he asked, not accusingly but with genuine wonder. "I can feel things. The plants, the water systems. It's like they're speaking to me." "The bond," Lara explained, equally amazed. "I used it to help the transmitter recognize your biological pattern as compatible. I didn't expect it to be so thorough." She reached out, hesitantly, touching the patterns on his arm. They brightened at her touch, responding to her own bioelectricity. "You've been changed at a fundamental level. Part Verdante, part human. Is it permanent?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Nothing like this has ever been documented." Before they could discuss it further, a holographic interface materialized in the center of the chamber, similar to the builder technology they had seen in the ruins, but more advanced, more refined. "Welcome to Sanctuary Nexus," announced a synthesized voice, speaking perfect galactic standard. "Biological patterns recognized. Verdante, modified human. Security protocols satisfied." The hologram expanded, showing a three-dimensional map of what appeared to be an enormous underground complex, extending for kilometers in all directions. This facility was constructed as a safeguard against catastrophic surface events. The voice continued. "It contains all necessary systems for long-term habitation, research, and eventual surface recolonization if required. Command functions are now available to authorized users." Thorn and Lara exchanged stunned looks. "Did we just inherit an entire underground civilization?" Thorn asked incredulously. "I think we did," Lara replied, her mind racing with possibilities. "The builders didn't just disappear. They moved underground, created this place as a refuge." The hologram shifted again, now displaying information in rapid sequence: schematics, biological data, historical records, communication protocols. "External communication systems are operational," the voice announced. "Galactic positioning confirms compatibility with current conquered networks. Can we access Concord information channels? Lara asked quickly. News feeds? Official announcements? Affirmative. Establishing connection. The hologram transformed into a newsfeed displaying the Concord official emblem. A somber-faced announcer was mid-sentence. Repeat. Admiral Octavian Harkness has been taken into custody following serious allegations of treason and conspiracy with Krell forces. The evidence, delivered anonymously to multiple members of the High Council, appears to conclusively demonstrate a systematic betrayal of Concord defense systems spanning more than 2 years. Lara let out a cry of triumph, grabbing Thorne's arm. It worked! They received the transmission! The news continued, detailing the initial investigation findings, the suspension of several high-ranking officers believed to be complicit, and the implementation of immediate security protocols to address the compromised defense systems. Harkness is finished, Thorne said with grim satisfaction. And your name seems to be kept out of it, at least for now. Anonymous whistleblower suits me fine, Lara replied, relief evident in her voice and bioluminescent patterns. What matters is that the evidence was acted upon. They spent the next hours exploring their immediate surroundings and learning about the sanctuary's capabilities through the helpful interface. The complex was vast beyond their expectations, a complete subterranean world capable of sustaining thousands of inhabitants, though they appeared to be its only current occupants. Most remarkably, both of their injuries had been completely healed by what the system called cellular reconstruction during the transmission process. The same mechanism had apparently facilitated the bioelectric bonding between them, creating Thorne's unprecedented hybrid physiology. The implications are enormous, Lara said as they shared a meal of synthesized but surprisingly delicious food provided by the sanctuary systems. This facility, the technology, the healing capabilities, it could transform relations between our species, not to mention giving the Concord a significant advantage over the Krell. Thorne added, assuming the Concord can be trusted with it. That's the question, isn't it? Lara mused. After Harkness, can we trust any large power with this kind of technology? Thorne considered this. Maybe it's not about giving it to one side or the other. Maybe it's about using it to establish something new, a third option. What are you suggesting? This place could serve as a neutral ground, a meeting point between species where the usual power dynamics don't apply. Thorne explained, warming to the idea. The builders clearly intended it as a place of preservation and cooperation. Lara's expression brightened. An embassy of sorts, not aligned with the Concord or any single species. Exactly. And with us, a human Verdante hybrid and a full Verdante, as its first representatives. The conversation continued late into what they decided to call night. Though in the subterranean sanctuary, time was an arbitrary concept. They explored ideas for the future, possibilities that neither would have imagined when they first encountered each other in the jungle above. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them, and they retired to separate chambers that the sanctuary had prepared according to their biological needs. Despite the comfort of her surroundings, Lara found sleep elusive, her mind racing with all that had happened and all that might yet come. 3 months later, the sanctuary had been transformed. What had begun as an empty refuge was now a bustling outpost of interspecies cooperation, with representatives from both the Concord and Verdante governments establishing a permanent presence. The matter transmitter technology had been partially shared, enough to allow secure travel to and from the sanctuary, but with key components kept confidential to prevent military applications. Lara stood on a balcony overlooking the crystalline cavern, watching as a newly arrived diplomatic team marveled at the underground ecosystem. Her hand rested absently on her abdomen, where the first human Verdante child in history was growing, a development that had shocked the medical teams, but seemed a natural extension of the bond she and Mason had formed. The Arcturian ambassador wants to discuss establishing a permanent mission here, Mason said, joining her at the balcony. The faint, bioluminescent patterns beneath his skin had become more pronounced over the months, though they remained subtle compared to full Verdante markings. His official title was now Security Director of Sanctuary Outpost, a position created specifically to utilize his unique combination of human tactical thinking and newly acquired Verdante environmental sensitivity. The bounty hunter had found a new purpose, one that aligned with both sides of his hybrid nature. "Tell him we'll meet tomorrow," Lara replied, leaning slightly against Mason's shoulder. "The Sanctuary Council needs to establish protocols for new member species before we expand too quickly." "The Council barely exists yet," Mason pointed out with a smile. "It's still mostly you making decisions and me enforcing them. That will change as more representatives arrive," Lara said. "The Conquered High Council is taking the Sanctuary seriously as a diplomatic avenue, especially since the evidence against Harkness implicated several other high-ranking officials. The aftermath of Harkness' arrest had indeed been far-reaching. The Admiral himself remained in custody, awaiting trial. His network of conspirators gradually being exposed and removed from power. The Krell had retreated to their own territory, their planned offensive derailed by the sudden restoration of conquered defense systems. "Dr. Alara wants to see you again," Mason said, changing the subject. "Something about unusual developmental markers in the fetus?" Lara nodded, unsurprised. "This pregnancy is uncharted territory for both species. Every day brings new discoveries." "Are you worried?" Mason asked, his hand covering hers where it rested on her abdomen. "Curious, not worried," Lara replied. "The Sanctuary's medical systems are far beyond anything in the Conquered. If any place can safely deliver a hybrid child, it's here." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the activity below. What had begun as a desperate flight through a deadly jungle had led them to something neither could have imagined. A new beginning for themselves and potentially for interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just collected your bounty?" Lara asked softly. Mason's bioluminescent patterns flared briefly, a sign he had learned indicated deep emotion. "I try not to think about paths not taken, but I suspect the universe has a way of bringing together those who are meant to find each other, one way or another." "Even across species?" "Especially across species," he replied, his arm encircling her waist. "The Builders knew it. That's why they created the bond capability in the first place, to bridge the biological gap between different forms of life. Below them." A Verdante scientist was explaining something to a human engineer, both gesturing excitedly at a piece of builder technology they were studying together. Similar scenes played out across the Sanctuary, former enemies finding common ground in this neutral space where old prejudices held no sway. "We have a transmission request from the surface," announced a Sanctuary interface nearby. "Conquered High Council, priority channel." "Accept," Lara said, straightening to her full height. The diplomatic work never ended. But then, that was precisely why the Sanctuary existed. As the holographic communication initialized, she felt Mason's presence beside her, steady, supportive, and fundamentally changed by their shared journey. From hunter and hunted to partners and pioneers of a new connection between their species. The alien girl who had been swallowed alive by a giant carnivorous plant, and the human who had pulled her out just in time, had found something neither had been looking for. A future worth fighting for. Together.